makes you happy? That's the question. What makes you happy? When I was about 6 years old, climbing trees made me happy. Riding motorcycles made me happy. And taking the boat out on the lake with my family. And my dad used to tell me this really ridiculous, silly joke every time we put the boat in the water. He said, Bart, you know the 2 happiest days of a man's life? No. When he buys his first boat and when he sells it. It makes no sense to a 6-year-old, right? But it makes a lot of sense now when you think about what is happiness. Because some of the things that you think make you happy or do make you happy today might not make you happy tomorrow. So let me ask you this. How many people get a dopamine rush when you see a picture of a baby? Right? Or a real baby. It's amazing. Everybody's, right? How about puppy dogs? Oh, okay. And if you don't like puppy dogs, this is bad. Kitty cat lovers? Even on the internet, you're just like, oh, I'm so happy. And this has got to get you. Dogs and cats living together. Right? So what's happening when you're seeing outside stimulation is your brain is emitting chemicals. So outside stimulation, career, success, love, money, kitty cats, pictures, it makes you happy. Your mind is a happiness cocktail of endorphins, oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin. I think that happy puppy dogs, kitty cats are all wonderful until the kitty cat scratches the sofa, the dog poops on the floor, and the baby becomes a teenager. In all seriousness, chemicals are what make us happy, and we tend to spend our life getting external stimulation for happiness. I see a sunset, and this happens all over the world. I see a sunset, and I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude that I'm alive and I can see it. It's just amazing to me every time. And the guy next to me looks at the sunset, and he goes, there's the clouds a-coming. There's rain. I'm like, what? But it's a beautiful sunset. Why am I an optimist? Why do I always see the glass half full and he sees it half empty? And that's the question I want to propose to you today. What I figured out is there's 3 simple tools or activities that can help you rewire your brain to happiness. So basically, you could hardwire your neural pathways to think positive. You know, Napoleon Hill talked about think and grow rich and think positive. You know, that's good in theory, but I want to know how specifically to think positive. And it all has to do with the 5 senses and the neural pathways. And the neurons, there's like 63 billion neurons in your head. My mom used to tell me, don't drink beer, you'll kill those brain cells and you'll have no more. That's not entirely true. Neuroplasticity and neuropruning are now proven that things grow back. I'm not suggesting you drink too much. This is not my point. I want to mention that the age of mental fitness. So there's an age of physical fitness that we've just seen past, and what they've done with the body is amazing. And I think we're in the age of mental fitness. What they've done in the last 15 years with neuropsychology and brain science is nothing less than remarkable. So in physical fitness, how many of you recognize this guy? George Reeves. He really sports tights well. I mean, that is tough to pull off pajamas in public. In 1955, he was the epitome of the male specimen. Very masculine, okay? And then Arnold Schwarzenegger. In less than 25 years, the entire fitness industry changed. And why? Nutrition, exercises. They realized that this bicep is not part of a big whole. It's isolated. With one exercise, you could do a bicep. With certain nutrition, certain drugs, certain repetition, you could go from George Reeves to Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's amazing. And that's the way the brain is. We used to think of the brain as a big 3-pound piece of confusion, but it's not. Different parts of your brain control different pieces of your life. From the fear center to the frontal lobe, all these different pieces, we can see under an MRI exactly what's happening when people are thinking, when people are having emotions, when people are being stimulated. You know, how do you really have an emotion? There's 5 senses, okay? Sight, visual, sound, auditory, feeling, touch, and of course, smell and taste. And some of you have a 6th sense. Now, I can't promise you I can give you a therapy for smell or taste, but I have some Italian cooks that would beg to differ, that that's the best way to happiness. But my 3 techniques involve all 3 of those senses. So you can actually program unconsciously by certain activities. So I want to see, can I hardwire myself to happiness so I can always be positive? Before I explain that, let me use a simple metaphor. A mountain, and it rains. Where's the water going to go down the mountain? The lowest point, right? Every raindrop goes down the mountain. And the first rain, it just randomly goes. But after 5 or 6 years, where does the rain go? Down the rivers, down the streams, and then it's a lake, right? It's a huge lake. And so after a while, that becomes a very carved out mountain. And all of you sit in the audience have 20, 30, 40 years of neural pathways that have been carved out over thinking the same thoughts over and over and over. And those are called habits. They're neural pathways. And so if you wanted to change a river on the mountain, what would you do? Would you sit in front of the water and stop it and that'd be ridiculous. You just dig a new trench, a little block, and all of a sudden it goes sideways. So that's what I'm proposing we do. We figure out which neural pathway really makes you happy, create another one, neuroplasticity, and then hopefully you'll just choose the happiness. Carla Schatz said, cells that fire together, wire together. You heard that phrase? Okay? It's amazing, and she's technically correct. So it's more important that neuropathway, neurons, if they fire together in a certain sequence with a certain repetition or emotional intensity, they wire. And that's why we have habits. That's why we have phobias. That's why we have reactions, okay? This is a neural pathway inside your brain. Psst, psst, all this electricity, right? How many of you had a song on the radio and you just remember your childhood, right? All of a sudden you're like, oh, that was prom. He was so cute and handsome. Oh, right? It was boom. It's a memory instantaneously. It's a memory. It's a visual, sight, sound, all from an auditory stimulation from 25 years ago. Amazing. Same thing happens from a negative experience. Let's say a little girl, 7 years old, walking through a barn, and she hears a rattle. That's my rattlesnake. What's that noise? And she sees a snake, and the snake comes shivering by and jumps at her and bites her on the leg. Some of you are just creeping out because of snakes. Will that girl love snakes the rest of their life? Or probably have a phobia, right? They are like, snake! And so the rest of the year, she shivers, she shakes, she can't explain it, she doesn't want to go to the zoo. That's a phobia. And it doesn't take years to make a phobia. How long does it take to create a neural pathway with that kind of intensity? Seconds. Instantaneous. That's why you can change quickly. Instantaneous, okay? This is the brain under MRI. It's very fascinating how you can see different parts of the brain. To make a new neural pathway, you need sequence and repetition, or you need intensity, like a phobia. I think we can create positive phobias. So create neural pathways with intention. And here's how we do it. Malcolm Gladwell talked about it takes 10,000 hours to be a master at anything. Has anybody read Malcolm Gladwell? He's a brilliant, brilliant author. And he says 10,000 hours to throw a football, kick a football, European football, to be a master musician or be an artist. And if you got 7,000, 8,000, you'd be a great teacher. But it takes that many hours of physical movement, practice, and rehearsal to be world class because your mind, your body is tied together. I don't think it takes 10,000 hours to program happiness. I think you can do it in 30 days. I think you can do it in 4 to 6 minutes a day if you had the intention of programming happiness. First tip, guided meditation. I'm not going to spend too much on meditation because so many smart people have talked about meditation before, but I want to give you a few distinctions of what makes it happen. Meditation is essentially visualization with an auditory and intention. So as much as I love meditating like a Tibetan monk and think about nothingness, I'm referring to spend a few minutes a day actually seeing what you want in a particular visual category. And you all do it now, but some of you do it like my mother, and she just worries about things that never happen. So she visualizes stuff that doesn't happen. And what happens? She has anxiety. What's the opposite of anxiety? Happiness. Hope. Hope is one of the greatest emotions you can have. And hope you can just create in your mind. So really, you don't even need external validation. You can just think about things and have things change. The way I use meditation is I literally record in my own voice some of the things in my life that make me happy. I put it in my little headphone, and I listen to it 6 minutes a day. It's a very simple exercise, and I encourage you to do it. Second thing, a magic question. I love this technique, and this is a technique you can take home right now, use it today, piece of cake. Tony Robbins says the quality of your life is the quality of your questions. Richard Bandler created NLP with John Grinder. Rex Sykes taught me something called a direction question, and I narrowed it down to something called a magic question. Here's what it is. It's one question that presupposes an answer so your brain goes out and finds good stuff. How great is today going to be? How much fun are we going to have today? How can I double my income? Or my personal favorite, how good looking am I? Because your brain only has a couple of answers. You're good looking, Bart, or you're really good looking. And the opposite is negative questions, right? And most of us ask bad questions all the time. So here's the tip that you can take home, and it's wonderful. Get an index card and write one powerful question with the language of presuppositions. Tape this card to your mirror in your restroom, in your bathroom, and every morning you just ask yourself one question. How can I double my income? How can I make my spouse feel loved? What's beautiful about today? And you'll answer it consciously in the morning, and then the rest of the day, your unconscious mind will continue to think about it. That tip alone will make your trip worth it, I promise. And finally, physical movement. Talked about kinesthetic movement, physical movement, how you can use your body and your mind to create changes. They did experiments with rhesus monkeys, and they figured out that if they taped their fingers together and moved their finger like this, a certain neural pathway lights up in their head under an MRI. But if they tape this finger down and do that finger, a different neural pathway, very similar, but slightly different. I thought that was incredible. Just a small movement of your fingers create a slightly different neural pathway, okay? And we know that through physical movement, you can make changes, okay? Spinal injuries, horrible topic. People that have it, sometimes they're paralyzed. But what do they do with people that have a paralyzed leg? Now, the leg is fine, right? And the brain is fine. What's not happening is not communicating. So the brain's doing electricity, move my leg, and it's not communicating. The leg's healthy. What they do is they move the leg over and over and over. And what happens if we have a miracle? All of a sudden, they start talking to each other. It kickstarts that entire idea. The leg kickstarts it. So they do it for a month, 2 months, 5 months, and maybe it all comes together. Neural pathways, little bitty things like that. When I was young, I told you I like riding motorcycles. And sometimes the motorcycle just wouldn't start. That's a bummer when you're 6, really. And what do is you hit the starter, it doesn't start. You kick it, it doesn't start. So what do? Well, I'm 6 years old. I'll push it up a hill. I'll put it in neutral. I'll push it down the hill. I'll jump on it. And what happens? The wheels turn the chain, turn the pistons, and then start the engine. Well, that's what's happening when people have injuries. Why do you have to wait to have an injury or a head injury to change your life? We know that certain movements of the body are stimulating certain parts of the brain. So my friend Sam Bada had a terrible car accident. He's a top radio voiceover artist. You probably heard his voice on movie trailers, audiobooks. And this is his identity, his life. He uses his voice. He had a head-on car collision about 1.5 years ago. And he literally lost the ability to speak. And he texted me, Bart, I can't speak. I'm really in trouble. Couldn't walk, dizzy. And I said, Sam, I don't know if this is going to help you, but let me give you a suggestion. One of the things I've learned is that this movement, this figure 8 movement, both in your body, like swinging a golf, but also in your handwriting, is synonymous with people that are great speakers and great orators. And I said, I know that your profession is speaking. I've personally been interviewed and interacted with 1,500 to 1,600 radio and TV hosts all over the world, the best in the business. And one of the things they all have in their handwriting is this trait. Not all of them, 70% of them. So it's a trait of speakers and writers. So, by the way, if you're a speaker or a writer or a golfer, add this to your handwriting, who knows, you might become a better golfer. But I told Sam, I said, Sam, I have no idea if this is going to work. But why don't you just practice writing this stroke every day? Pages and pages. He goes, Bart, I can barely even write. I go, no, you can't. I know you can't write. Because he forgot, right? His hand, he forgot to write. So he goes, okay, I'll try it. I'll try anything, right? Medicine and drugs. He's just doing everything he can to get his life back. And so he texts me 30 days later, 29 days later. He said, Bart, I don't know what to tell you. He goes, it's been 30 days, and I have 80% of my ability to speak back. 80%. Because of handwriting and nutrition. And I thought that's just unbelievable. Is that really possible? Can you really use micro movements of the fingers to program certain neural pathways of the brain? I think you can. I think you can. In India, we have a partnership with Imran and Rafi Beg, and they, with me, created a workbook for children. And so over 90 days, we have them do handwriting exercises. And 30,000 children have gone through this program and improved their grades, improved their self-esteem, improved their ability to memorize things. And of course, that's 60,000 very happy parents. So while Sam is an exception, because we haven't done enough research, India, wow, that's 30,000 people saying, hey, you know what? If we change your handwriting, you can change your life. Which sounds like an odd premise. And when someone told me that many, many years ago, I thought, that's really silly. That doesn't make any sense. But we didn't have the neuroscience to back up why neural pathways and micro movements of the fingers make any difference. So when I was about 15 years old, a guy named Dr. Walker said, Bart, if you change the way you sign your name, you could be successful and wealthy and happy one day. And I go, well, that's a small price to pay. If it works, I'm successful, rich, and happy. If it doesn't work, my name is tilted and I've got weird T-bars. So I tried it. And I really believed that that small change in my writing, which is basically micro movements of the finger, just like big movements of the leg, is a reason I had a higher self-image and the reason I think I've been more optimistic in my life. So here's your final tip. Handwriting is really brain writing. And I know that because I met a guy with no arms, a professional speaker, and he says, oh, I can write. I go, really? Pulled off his shoe, signed his name, he wrote a sentence for me. I looked at his handwriting. I showed some personality traits. His wife said, he's stubborn. So it's brain writing. So if you tilt your handwriting up to the right, that's optimism. And just like your body language, everything's looking up, that's body language. So in conclusion, there's 3 tips to do it. Audio, better self-talk, ask better questions. Visualize what you want, and of course, use your physiology to make small changes in your unconscious mind. And that's what I call the neuro pathway to happiness. Thank you.